You're very welcome. Those of you who are watching later, we hope you enjoy this presentation by Andrew Kane, the author of the really quite superb Townland Atlas of Ulster. Andrew joined the foundation as a researcher in 2017, and he's been a vital part of the team ever since coming on board. Incredibly skilled, incredibly knowledgeable, as you will find out. Because today he is going to give us a class by the author himself, so right from the horse's mouth, on how to use this book, get the most out of it. It's stunning looking. There's so much to it. There's so many elements to it. But how just to get the best out of it. And Andrew's going to take over now and start showing you. Just quickly, any questions you have, please write them and place them in the chat. Anything that can be dealt with immediately by the Foundations team will be. Any others that might be held to the end for Andrew to answer in person, we will do so. But you need to put your question into the chat if you're doing so. Okay, I'll pass over to Andrew. Thank you very much.
Right, I'd forgotten to unmute myself there. Sorry, I didn't appear just as quickly as I should have. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming along to hear why I think the Townland Atlas of Ulster is such an absolutely essential research guide, and what you can use it for in particular. So, as you hopefully you've all already bought one, and if not, please speak to Conleth afterwards. There you can see the cover with a selection of some of the townlands that mean something to myself and some other members of staff, just randomly placed all over a map of Ulster. So I shall. What is a townland? I said in the brief for this talk that I would give a very brief outline of what I've been going around a lot of the local societies talking about and just introducing townlands generally. On the screen is the definition from our website, which is kind of the definition that you read almost everywhere about it. It's the smallest administrative territorial unit, and it can vary hugely in size. It is of older, it goes back into the mists of history, and was, because it was such a useful measure, it was used throughout the 18th, 19th centuries up to the 20th century, and is a very important marker of local identity now rather than on any administrative purpose. So this is an extract from the Book of Armagh, which was written, they reckon, in 807 AD. And it talks about the townland of Drumlees in County Leitrim. Now, not normally you see place names, but you just are not sure whether they refer to what we think of as that townland today. But we can tell from this text it actually describes the boundaries of the townland. So we're able to tell that it's what people in County Leitrim would know of as the townland of Drumleesh. So that's very useful, but it's only a sort of one-off little example. More can be seen from this list of townlands from a charter of a monastery in Downpatrick in County Down. Most of those words on the screen are townland names, and by reading through those and putting them into readable letters for the likes of us who are not skilled in reading things from the 12th century, you can see that that's a list of townlands to the southwest of Downpatrick town, which are strictly followed today in that there are no gaps. You can see it's a whole conglomeration of townlands all together, no gaps, no extra words. Most of the townlands are readily identifiable. Some of them take a little bit more complicated translation, but in the majority of cases, the townland name is very, very evident. So then all these instances are one-offs. You find them in leases or in grants and so on, but they do not cover all of Ireland. Really, the first sort of large-scale source which I had to work with were the Bodley maps. Now, these are maps that were created around 1609. They are to map the territories of the Earls of Tyrone and Tyrconnell and the Maguires who had fled Ireland in the flight of the Earls. Their lands had been forfeit, and civil servants then went round and made lists of the names of the places that were available for allocation, and then drew maps from those written descriptions. So while the maps themselves are not particularly scientifically accurate, and in fact, some of them are absolutely awful. If you look at the one for Armagh barony, it's a mirror image of what the reality of the situation is. The person who was drawing the map from the notes had obviously started at the wrong side of the page. But this is for the barony of Lochansholen, which is in the south of County Londonderry, and showing the area around Kilrea, where I went to school and grew up. And you can see by the townland names that I have added in over the top of the original that the townlands are all pretty much single entities with names that are almost exactly the same as they were recorded way back in 1609. Very, very few are double. Some of them, like Moneystachan and Glenone there. Glenone is obviously the suburb really of Port Glenone on west of the Bann, the main town being east of the Bann. But the vast majority of the cases there, the townland mapped in 1609 equates exactly to the townland that we know today. Again, this really demonstrates the difficulty we have sometimes in looking at old documents and seeing the name of something that we recognize to be a townland, but we do not know, we can't find any evidence of maybe the townland that we want. We see all these other townlands that we can see are around them, but we may be looking for a townland that seems not to appear in the old records. Now, the barony of Dunluce was a manor on the estates of the Earl of Antrim. The Earl had his estates around Glenarm had been in the family since 1399, and the ones around Ballymoney since the 1550s. So him, and particularly his stewards and staff, knew these lands like the back of their hand. They knew all the subdivisions and what exactly was referred to by them. So you can see if you look at that, I have delineated in green outlines the quarters as they're generally recorded as on the Earl's estates in Dunluce Barony in the 1650s. And you can see that some of them are not the ones that are underlined, you can see those have the same name, but you can see that there are others which have maybe two or even three, or sometimes even four modern townlands within the name, which we would recognize maybe as being one townland today. So these quarters, as they're known, can contain a couple or three townlands. So you can see there over on the right-hand side of your screen, the Ballynock, the quarter of Ballynock also includes the modern townlands of Ballynock Big, Ballynock Little, and Turnavennog. So all three of those, if you were looking for a lease for Turnavennog in the 1600s, you probably wouldn't find it because it would be under the name Ballynock Quarter in the estate papers. But that's just kind of the thing that we're dealing with whenever we look at townlands. You have to be sure that the document you're referring to is actually referring to a townland and not a larger body like a quarter or even a parish. Yeah, I didn't keep in. I have a slide which I often talk about, which shows a map from the old part of the Earl of Antrim's estates, where there's an area in Kilfeatron parish known as the Six Quarters of Ballytearam. Now, not only this Six Quarters doesn't make sense to most of us, but whenever you actually look at the map and count them, there are actually 7 land units within it. And each of those either contain 1, 2, 3, or 4 townlands because they're quarters rather than a smaller unit. So hopefully that'll give you a wee sort of brief introduction of what a townland is and what the difficulties are in recognizing them in early records. And there's a great deal more information on this in the first narrative section of the Atlas. So I would encourage you all to read that carefully and sort of deepen your understanding of where these things have come from and how the ones that are called townlands today are recognizable compared to the things that you might read about in old leases or estate papers. Turning then to the modern side of things, if you look up all 16,500 townlands named in the book are listed in the index. There's 267 pages of index. It's an enormous chunk of reading. But for each townland, it gives you the information on this slide. The map number, as it's numbered in the book, which gives you the barony, gives you the county, civil parish, registration district, or etc., etc. You see all the things there. And this is for the townland, a townland that I grew up in. This is the details from it. And I'll go through each of these categories really and show you why those are important to the researcher and what you would do with the information you have found in the index. First of all, you might find that there are more than one townland in Ulster with the name that you're looking for, or there could be as many as 15 or 20 if it's a very generic type of name, like Dromore, which just means the big ridge or the big hill. Now, there are a lot of big hills in Ireland, and there's a lot of Dromores in the Townland index. But there are a lot of other names that can mean the same, mean something very generic, and you see a lot of. So you can, by looking at the parish and the county that they're in on the index, it helps you identify where you're looking for. And if there are 5 or 6, you might need to narrow. If you only know the townland name, you might need to then do some research on 5 or 6 Ballykeels or whatever to try to find the one that you're looking for. So baronies are a now obsolete administrative breakdown. They were actually really a subdivision of a county, and there are 81 divisions that I have used in the book. Now, they're not all, strictly speaking, townlands or baronies in the letter of the law. Some of them are half baronies. Some of them, like the old urban areas that really were monastery lands, Coleraine Liberties, Londonderry Liberties, Newry, and Carrickfergus. They are not, strictly speaking, baronies. They are liberties or lordships, but I have just included them as a separate barony for the purposes of the book. Same applies. Tithe was originally one barony back in the 1600s. It was then split into upper and lower. Lower was split into upper half and lower half of lower. Upper was the same, but the upper half of upper Tithe was in 2 portions that were separated by the lordship of Newry. So there's an upper portion of the upper half of upper Tithe and a lower portion, also called the detached portion. So you can get into all sorts of convolutions. But the map at the beginning of the section of maps, this map shows you exactly what you're looking at and what area the barony covers. So what records are you going to find looking by barony? Well, 19th century census returns are all organised on a barony basis. Parliamentary voter lists until the 1880s were again on a barony basis. You registered to vote in your barony if you were voting in the county constituency. And these first two are things that we refer to quite regularly. They're digitized on various websites and so on. But unless you know what you're looking at, you can't. And these are none of those records are comprehensive. They don't cover every barony or every townland. So you need to know what might be missing, and you need to see whenever you look at a document, a freeholders list on the Prony website or no, 19th century census return on the National Archives of Ireland website. You need to know whether my barony has actually been digitized, has survived and been digitized. So that's quite important. That's kind of one of the reasons that's really important to know. Then baronial presentment sessions are again a method of local government where local taxes were raised and local money spent on a baronial basis. How the baronial presentment sessions were selected were that the top 100 taxpayers in the barony were listed, and there was a kind of a lottery system by which 24 men were picked to sit on the presentment sessions and decide on tax matters for everyone else. And they reckoned as among the highest taxpayers, they would be the ones that had the most interest in doing so. So again, you might find these in Prony, but you need to know what barony, whether it's worth looking at the barony that you may particularly not necessarily be one that you're in, or just really to understand how useful it is to you. Registry of Deeds will come to look at this in more detail, and again, probate districts. After probate was moved from a Church of Ireland court to the national government courts in 1858, the probate district that you were allocated to depended on what barony you were in rather than what diocese. So it's important from that point of view. Here you see then a typical voter list. This is for the barony of the Upper Fuse in County Armagh, and it gives you the name of the voter down the right-hand column. If you can see, my little red dot has disappeared and just put him back on. So there's the name of the voter, the freeholder, where he lives, and where his land that he holds that entitles him to vote is, who his landlord is, the value, rough value of the freehold, if it's a lease for lives, who the lives are, and where and when he registered his right to vote. All really useful and interesting information for the researcher. But again, if you're in the barony of Lower Fuse, you need to check that you're looking at the right list to make sure that you are finding your guy. Then this is the Registry of Deeds. Registry of Deeds starts in 1708 and is an absolutely fabulous resource, which is now available through the Family Search website online. There are also, if you're in Prony, you can look at it on microfilm and so on, or you can go down to Dublin and look at the original books. But the fact you can just sit at home and scroll through all these microfilms that have been digitized is fantastic. It's only indexed in two ways: the name of the townland, the initial letter, in other words, of the townland. So all C's are just jumbled up together. And also by the name of the grantor of the lease, not the person who's taking the land, but the person who is granting the lease to them. After 1828, there were they previously had been organised by county, so you could look at all the C's in County Fermanagh, but you had to go all the way through them. But by 1828, so many leases were being registered each year, they moved to a system of organising it by barony. So you only had to look through all the C's in Clonolly barony, for example, rather than for the whole. There are 8 baronies in the county of Fermanagh, so that could decrease your amount of searching you have to do by 7/8, which is fantastic. But you need to know what barony you're looking in before you can even look at the index. The other thing is that, I mean, clearly this website does have a full text search, AI run full text search, but it is not going to give you a fully comprehensive answer to the question because of the fact that spelling can be so unpredictable and the writing can be absolutely appalling. So whether or not the AI is able to read it and interpret it correctly, or whether it was even spelt anyway close to what we would recognize by the clerks who input it in the first place, it's really, if you know what your name of your townland is, the name of your barony, you can go through it step by step and make sure you're not missing anything. Again, here is just something on baronial presentment sessions. I found this just in a quick newspaper search. The barony of Raphoe held their presentment sessions, and this is right at the beginning of the famine in 1846. So there was clearly a lot of interest in basically the county providing employment to people who'd lost their livelihood by the potato blight. And you can see there's a list of the people among those present. We observed, and it lists a lot of the taxpayers who would have been at that session. Newspaper reports will often list things like this here. And if you get the actual presentment papers in Prony or elsewhere, it will say things like, yeah, we've decided to fix the road between Jimmy Smith's house and Patrick Bradley's, and Jimmy will be helped by such and such and such and such and such and such. So it'll name the people doing the work, it'll name the people whose houses mark the road that needs work and all that kind of stuff. So you can see lots of people, even if they're not taxpayers, they can appear on that list. So moving on then to the next item on the index beyond barony, we talk about registration district and poor law union. Now these are one and the same. The poor law districts were created in the 1830s, 1840s under the Poor Law Act, and these divisions were divided up into voting districts. Whenever civil registration came along in 1845 for marriages and 1864 for births and deaths, we rather than reinvent the wheel, they just called all the poor law unions registration districts. So you then had, you registered your marriage, birth, death, whatever, in the same market town that had the workhouse and was therefore the centre of the poor law union. And the map, it would be impossible. We couldn't have the boundaries of all these different units on the face of the map. So we have these in the index. And you can see there is a map of Ulster showing the boundary of the poor law districts and a list of the code used in the index rather than type Carrick-Macross in every time CMX fitted the job perfectly. And they're in alphabetical order by the code. So whenever you see it, the code in the index, you can look it up on that list at the beginning of the section. Those items, those areas in green that you can see in that map are little bits of the poor law union, where a poor law union has part of a county which the workhouse is not situated in. So for example, if we look up on the north coast here, we can see that Coleraine Poor Law Union has a small part of North Antrim included in it. So that's indicated in green so that we can see that that is not part of Ballymoney or Ballycastle. And likewise, Ballymoney has a small piece of County Londonderry in it. And so the most complicated one is Lurgan, which is parts of South Antrim and parts of West County Down. And the slight minority of the land is actually in County Armagh, where Lurgan itself is. So you can see there that that gives you a rough idea. There have been some changes in the Poor Law Union stroke registration district over the years. And those mostly related to the fact that whenever county councils were introduced in 1898, because the election of the Poor Law Guardians was governed by these electoral districts, which have been set up under the Poor Law, these districts were then used for elections for county councillors. So some places like the part of North Antrim that was in Coleraine was moved into Ballymoney Poor Law Union, and the part of Ballymoney Poor Law Union that was in County Derry was moved into the Coleraine Poor Law Union. Or yeah, so that it's sort of tidying up a lot of these border areas. And not all areas were done like that. Clearly, Belfast spans County Antrim and County Down, as does Lisburn. It's mostly ones that Coleraine, Ballymoney one. There's also ones sort of border areas, Clogher and Monaghan. There was the parts of Clogher that were in County Monaghan were moved into Monaghan district and so on. And a lot of these ones around Lough Erne and so on. But you can check that information up. Hopefully that will be actually in the new edition, the next edition of the book. So this is just to show how you can find that these poor law unions stroke registration districts have changed. This is my great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather who died in the same place, but 36 years apart. When my great-great-grandfather died in whenever my great-great-grandfather died in 1872, the district of Kilrea was in the Poor Law Union of Ballymoney. So his death is registered in Ballymoney district. Whereas when his son, my great-grandfather, died in 1908, it was in Coleraine. So you can see there the district of Coleraine has moved to the Union of Coleraine. So that's where it's registered. So just whenever you're looking at the Irish genealogy website that gives you all the old births, marriage and death certificates, just be aware that sometimes the registration district will change. And you can see that from looking at the maps. And poor law did not just deal with the dreaded workhouse. So you can often find lots of things about in the minutes, people who are supplying goods to the workhouse or to the even the dispensary districts, the doctors, healthcare provided at local district level, and obviously the infirmary at the workhouse, which was not exclusively used by people who had been admitted to the workhouse under the poor law. This was free healthcare available to all. Vaccinations are another good one for the late 1800s. You can see, particularly for that period where people are just starting school in the 1860s, they could be then vaccinated, but there's no birth certificate for them, so their birth details will be in the vaccination certificates in the poor law records. So again, you need to know the union. This item on the screen is an extract from the Workhouse Master's diary of Limavady Workhouse. And it gives you just an indication of how absolutely brilliant these records can be, because these people are clearly not in the best of financial health and they've been admitted to the workhouse. But we're talking the 1830s here, 1834. So there's no civil registration. So things that happen to these, they're not going to appear in a gravestone because they don't have the money to have a gravestone. They're probably going to be buried, if they die there, they're going to be buried in the workhouse infirmary or the workhouse graveyard. So they'll not have a gravestone or not even have a register. And so on. So we can see here on the Monday, the 7th of October, Elizabeth Hutchison gave birth to a child in the workhouse. So now, if you find that that's your ancestor, that could be the only place that the date of that child's birth is recorded. William Lind, then on the 21st of October, died aged 61. Again, this is not going to appear anywhere else. And it says actually even that he died of a disease of the brains. So, you're really getting a lot of information about people who do not appear in a lot of records, but here they are in the poor law records. And it's a really, really useful source. Ordnance survey sheet number. This was always a real bugbear of mine. Whenever you were looking at anything else that was recorded onto the Ordnance survey sheets. So, for example, all valuation records, tithe records, anything like that that you wanted to look up, you had to know what sheet number your townland or your actual house was on. And there was no easy way to do that. This is a map which I'd produced in connection with the North of Ireland Family History Society, indicating the sheets and showing in different background colours the various parishes of the 6 counties of Northern Ireland. Even it, though, is not really sufficient to tell you what sheet number. You can't really tell. Oh, is there a wee bit of North Dungiven? I wonder, is my ancestor live in that wee bit, or does he live in sheet 17 or sheet 25 or even sheet 31? There's so many choices there. So I have recorded the sheet number in the index against every townland. And where the townland covers more than one sheet, if it's on the edge of a sheet, all the sheet numbers are mentioned. Should that be even the one right on the meeting of 4 sheets? Sometimes you'll see it's hard to find there. The original mapping was done from the 1830s onwards by the Ordnance Survey and is an absolutely fantastic resource. This, for example, is sheet 22 in Fermanagh, or a part of it. And you can see there the absolutely wonderful detail that you have with this. You can see what roads are tree lined, where the houses are, the peaks, wells, gravel pits. There's just so much marked on this, and all buildings are marked in black. So you can see so much information on this. So even if you cannot find a map showing, oh, Joe Bloggs lived in this particular house, if you know that that is the only house there that is actually in Derryinch Townland, that's exactly where he lived. It isn't in that case, but just yeah, you can just you can get lucky with things like that. And you can also, by process of elimination, find out what other houses there are. I'd mentioned how these were the tithes, which were done in the 1820s, 1830s, how they were plotted on to the Ordnance Survey map. And again, you need to check the actual map to see whether that has been done. It's quite patchy, and one of the things we're looking at for the future is actually identifying which specific townlands are mapped out with the each individual farm boundary, as opposed to different. Some of them will just say a range of numbers, which if you look at the book, the tithe book, will have that numbers down the side of the left-hand column, so you can identify them to the place. You can actually see someone's farm. This is from Antrim sheet 55, and you can see here that the Grange of Carmavy has all them numbered, and Ballymather next door does not, which is a pity because my ancestors lived in Ballymather. The same applies to Griffiths. I am sure that you're all pretty au fait with the existence of Griffiths valuation and the fact that you can, there's a number of websites you can look it up on, but I tend to use Ask About Ireland because of the maps that they've digitized, and you can just link and go straight in to the map. It gives you the numbers. You see the numbers in red for each of these townlands. Again, but if you look at the map that's on the Ask About Ireland website, you see that where the sheet changes, you can see the change in colour. The one below does not have the numbers on it. And guess what? But my ancestors lived in Tullygarvan, which is this townland, which only has numbers 1, 3, and a very small part of number 5 numbered. Needless to say, my ancestors did not live on any of those farms. So you'd have to go to Prony and order out more valuation maps, a later series of the valuation maps, to see if you can find one that has the plots numbered. And you should be able to do that because they will have maybe half a dozen maps of number 16, which is the lower one. And it's just the one that's been digitized by Ask About Ireland that doesn't have the numbers. So again, it's important. You may think, yeah, I can look that up, no problem. But if you encounter any difficulty, you need to know your sheet number. And if you look up the sheet number in the Prony catalogue, this is how much information it tells you about each one. We can tell that these are County Down because one of them says it's the parishes of Dundonald and Hollywood, and the rest are just the sheet number. So you're really, without this index, you're really fishing in the dark. The next thing then I looked at was parishes. And really, I wanted to emphasize the point that not all parishes are the same. I should have pointed it out whenever we had the screen up about the various things that came up in the index for the townland that I grew up in, because you can see from it that it's in the civil parish of Achadui, but it's in the Church of Ireland parish of Kilrea and the Roman Catholic parish of Coleraine. So it's so if somebody says, "Oh, our ancestors always said they came from parish X," you need to know what they meant by that. Were they going by an official government document that said that that was the civil parish they lived in, or were they going by that was the church they attended? And if so, which denomination was that? Obviously, the civil parishes at one stage coincided with the parishes as used by the Roman Catholic and Church of Ireland churches, but as church hierarchies decided they wanted to reorganize their parishes with either building higher populations in some areas or populations falling, those were done basically by the church for church reasons. So what I've done was listed for each county. Well, clearly you can look it up in the index for your townland, but then you can come to the parishes index, which is just before you get to the list of all the townlands. You get these list of parishes. Now, the civil parishes are listed by county and then alphabetically, and within that they tell you which diocese it's in, which we'll come to. Where the diocese has changed at any point, there's a little asterisk, as you can see there. And at the bottom of the page, which I haven't included, it will give you an explanation as to when that change took place and what diocese it changed to or from. So you can see that's the information there. Then it goes to the Church of Ireland names. Now, where the Church of Ireland is colloquially known as a particular name, for example, Carnlough Church of Ireland is really the parish church for our Clinus parish. That's in square brackets. Where the Church of Ireland has a totally different name for the parish, it's not. And you can see quite often what happened when the population built up, increased. Church of Ireland tended to create new parishes within the old parishes. So you can see there that Ballinderry was split, Antrim was split, and so on. And some were so small, like Achigallan, that it never had a Church of Ireland church in it. It had been united with Macramesk since 1634. So you can read the details, you can read the history, you can see how the parishes have evolved, so that if you are looking for Church of Ireland records in a particular period, you can see which churches existed within your civil parish and which your townland belonged to. And again, it shows you the dedication of the church and the maps in the atlas that cover that particular parish. Billy is a parish which was split 3 times. Ballintoy was part of Billy parish until 1745. Then in 1732, Dunseverick was taken out of Billy as well. And then finally in 1972, Dunseverick and Ballintoy were united together because they didn't have enough population to serve 2 clergymen. So in the Church of Ireland hierarchy, they took a different line on these parishes. They tended not to create new parishes, but rather to build more than one chapel within a particular parish. So what I've done for the Roman Catholic parishes, I have started with the 1704 clergy list, which was compiled on a county basis under the penal laws, and it will tell me which Roman Catholic clergyman was responsible for each civil parish or part of a civil parish. And so we were able to compile a list of the Roman Catholic parishes in 1704. And then those will change over time. As you can see there, Plumbridge, it included the civil parishes of Upper and Lower Bodoni, but part of it was hived off to create the Roman Catholic parish of Gorton, or Gorchin, as they say up there, in 1730. And then you can see in the right-hand side the churches that are within that parish and what year they were built. So you can see, if you're saying my family were Roman Catholic, we came from Plumbridge, they were baptized in 1890, they will not have been baptized in St. Patrick's Cranagh because it wasn't built until 1912, and so on. So you can see there the dates where available. Sometimes I haven't been able to find them easily and I have left them out. You can see that Portrush and Bushmills was a very complicated one. Although the Earl of Antrim had a private chapel which covered a lot of North Antrim, until 1830, or then after 1730, Resharkin became the parish church for the whole of the manor of Dunluce, and little bits of parishes which were adjoining, parishes that were within that. So then it wasn't until 1825 that parish started to be broken up. So you can see there evidence of what churches were in the parish going back to 1700. Okay. There's 8 pages of this in the Atlas. If you're in the Church of Ireland parishes within Belfast, they get very, very complicated. I think there's 82 or something parochial units in the Church of Ireland within the city of Belfast, all arising out of what was St. Patrick's Parish Church on the Shankill Road. So you can see that I have done a chart, a sort of flow chart showing how each of the parishes that became created, what parish they were hived out of, and if more than one, which others, when that was by year, and if the parishes then, particularly in the west were of the city where a lot of the churches have been merged or closed, what happened when it closed, what it merged with, so on and so forth. Several of the city centre parishes as well moved their parochial district from a small area of city centre, which used to be densely populated, to the suburbs or to further away from the city centre. So, and that one goes back to the 1600s. I was telling you I would come back to why you needed your Church of Ireland diocese before 1858, because they have dealt with the wills, the probate of wills and admons administration where there is no will. You can search for the indexes for these survive, but the vast majority of the wills are lost. However, you can search those indexes on the Prony website under the Prony names page. And again, you'll need to know the diocese, because they will only tend to give you the townland and diocese that the person is in. And as a diocese is, I mean, there are 6, 7 dioceses that cover Ulster, and the vast majority of them will have a lot of townlands of the same name. So you really need to work out where your diocesan boundary is rather than your county boundary and things like that there. For example, Dromore is the western part of County Down, mostly Iveagh barony, but it includes parts of Armagh and County Antrim. Connor Diocese is mostly County Antrim, but it includes small parts of County Londonderry and County Down. And there are, as we saw for Dromore, small parts of County Antrim which are in Dromore. So be aware that these probate districts will change because the diocese does not conform to the parish or the county or barony boundaries. Now, even though the majority of wills were lost in the fire in the Four Courts, there are all the indexes have survived, and in addition to that, there's about 13,000 wills pre-1858 wills that have survived and can be consulted either in copy form or in summary or transcription in prony. It's always worth looking. On top of that, I don't know whether this is available on any of the other paid websites, but on Find My Past, which you can access in Prony, they have a lot of the detailed indexes. This, for example, is the list of wills proved in Down Diocese in 1818, and it lists the name of the person, gives you the number, which is no use to us now because if you go, that number relates to a place in the Public Records Office that was burnt. It gives you the parish, the wills, whether it's a will or whether it's an admon, whether there is a inventory of goods with it, who the executors were, which is very useful, the date of probate, and then other remarks, which can be useful in terms of can give date of death and that kind of thing. So even as early as 1818, there's information there which is more comprehensive than the information you get in the will calendars post 1858, but it may be hard to get to. But if you know your diocese, you're on your way. And here's one of those County Down wills. Again, we wouldn't expect to see a will book before 1858 because it is the civil, the probate courts whose will books are on the Prony website. But this is the County Down or the Down Diocesan Court will book, which survives for the period from 1850 up until 1858. And you can read there's Robert McKee of Black Abbey, deceased, and it gives you their details about down the left when he died, when probate was granted, what the value is of effects were, and then it gives the wording of the will with all the juicy details of who's been left out and who's been included. So that's really the dealing almost entirely with the Townland Index. But there are other index. We've looked kind of at what in terms of what the parish indexes provide as well under the Townland banner. But there are also estates, and this is perhaps the most important column in the Townland Index is what estate you have, and then you go and look that up in the estates index. There's just so much information which covers the whole estate, which I couldn't put for each townland. I had to hive that off into a more manageable list. And I think there are 492 estates listed. I've ignored the really small ones, but there's an awful lot of them in there. So details that you will find in them are the name. Often it will give you the name that the manor was known by, what it maybe the proportion, which is how it was described in the early 1600s, which often reflected the pre-plantation Gaelic unit or estate. And it'll give you other alternatives, like often the name of the main town is referenced, that kind of thing. It'll tell you who owned the property at the plantation, either by plantation grant or by confirmed by inquisition. And then it will give you a grant reference in Hill's Plantation of Ulster, which is a very useful book, which will provide details of all the townlands that were granted to each person. And that will give you the reference number to look that up. We'll give you the government surveys where they chased up what had people who had been granted land in the plantation, whether they were abiding by their lease conditions or whether they could be milked for a little more money for the government for technical breaches. In fact, they were more keen just to fine you for breaching than actually taking the lease away from you. So we'll look at some of those. Then the muster rolls from the early 1830s, which again list about over 13,000 individuals by estate. a fantastic resource for placing our families back in the early part of the 17th century. I've Griffith's valuation in there, which is the link to the 20th century, and using the valuation revision books and Prony, you can also then follow those through into to 1930 and practically living memory. But the one which is very often overlooked here is the books of survey and distribution. We are very, very lucky in Prony to have 8.5 of the 9 counties of Ulster covered by these books, mainly because the Sir Arthur Annesley of Castlewellan was the man in charge of the committee which produced it, the committee that produced them. So he had a copy at home, so he didn't have to travel into Dublin to the office every day. So working from home did start before COVID. But this records all the townlands, as I say, except for half a county in Ulster, who owned them at the outbreak of the 1741 rebellion. And then if they were subject to forfeiture, or then the people who owned them had the right to appeal to the Court of Claims and have their lands restored. So then at the end of the day, who got those lands under the Restoration Settlement is also noted, with how much they had to pay. And it's just a great resource for who, if you're particularly interested in a particular townland, who owned it is the most important thing that you can find. So even if it's not your ancestor who is the owner who appears in these, it signposts you to estate papers, onto papers of individuals who will appear in the public record and who you can read their papers and find out, is your family mentioned. Each estate, then each of the major estates, I also added a little note. This was particularly because I wanted to give you the ability to find the estate in other papers. So I've traced the ownership where there's been a change of name, or where there's been no change of name, but the family, the name of the grantor in the Registry of Deeds would have changed. For example, the MacDonalds of Sir Randall MacDonald became Lord Dunluce, and then he became the Earl of Antrim. And his family then, of course, you need to look under A for Antrim in the index rather than M for MacDonald. Another one there, Langford's, their estate in County Antrim. Langford's daughter married Sir John Rowley, and the Rowley then became the name of the landlord. There's other endless estates where they've changed name, and knowing when those changes took place, either by the inheritance of it through the female line, or by being granted a title, or so on and so on. It's all in there. So it's really the link between the plantation era and the great estates that survived into the 20th century. I've also said here that who was granted the estate in the 1610s is a real clue as to where the tenants on that estate might have come from at that time. It's not foolproof, but it's a starting point. I would say it's probably not a very strong starting point. But it's interesting because not only were English and Scots estate owners granted land under the plantation, but other Irish landowners were granted estates in areas apart from where they had traditionally lived. And that could be a clue that your ancestors had maybe moved with them from their ancestral estates to their new estate. And it's interesting always to look at that. And again, always look at the name for searching for deeds. Here's an example of a plantation grant taken from Hills. And there's the 5, which you would have seen as the reference, and the reference to that barony, to this particular grant. And it lists there the lands which are included. And it says created into the manor of Roe, and so on and so on, and how much it costs, and he has to pay £8 a year. then this is an example from some of these reports, the commissions, where they've come to see that you're abiding by your plantation requirements. And you can see here, this is the estate of Anthony Dillon, or actually John Dillon, in North Armagh. And you can see here it describes what building work he's done, which were conditions of his grants. But it also describes how many people he has granted leases to, and who they all are, and which townlands they're in. So you can see here that, for example, Grange townland is being granted to John Saltington, Samuel Bates, Edmund Brooke, and Anthony Dawson. So these are not big farmers, but they appear in these records from 1622. And every townland in his estate is listed. Unfortunately, the guy who did County Armagh, he also did County Tyrone, but the ones in other counties maybe not as diligent as he was. And you don't always get that level of detail. But I've come across ones with 40 or 50 names for small rural estates. Excuse me. Right. Again, here's the muster roll, printed by the foundation. And the reference in the atlas will give you the folio number and the name of the chief tenant, so that you can find this within the book, which doesn't really give you the name of the estates. And again, it won't give you a townland level, but it'll give you an estate and plenty of names. Here is the books of survey and distribution. You can see here, these are all down the left-hand side, the names of people who have forfeited their estates. And here are the people who they have been granted to. And here's how much those lucky people had to pay for the privilege. And Michael Cole did not lose his, he's still there. Just doesn't have to pay any extra. But the level of detail of these surveys is incredible compared to anything else we come across this early. Again, this is looking at the Registry of Deeds, the lands index, alphabetical, horrible. This column here will show you the manor name, or the barony name, or the parish name, sometimes more than one, or sometimes none at all, but it can help you work out what a badly spelled townland actually is. But again, make sure you don't skip a time period, because it will give you a specific time period, and then the book could contain the start of the next time period without you being aware of it if you jump too many pages at once. If you have the landlord's name, great, because they are strictly alphabetical and much easier to use, much neater, and it gives you the name of the person renting. But the problem with that is that this is for the whole of Ireland. So you just don't know that you're going to find, it could be an enormously long list if a landlord has land in more than one place. And on the other hand, it could be that you're the tenant, your ancestors were the tenant of a tenant. So the landlord of the manor or the estate is not the landlord of your ancestors. Particularly in the Earl of Antrim's estate, where maybe 20 or 30 townlands could be rented to one person as a middleman. So, and again, I was explaining you could look that up in Family Search. I find it very difficult to go to this page, so I always just Google Family Search number 185730, and it will take me there. That is the catalogue number that it's under, but I cannot get it to take me through their indexing system. Then up in the top left, you will see here full text. And if you click that, you'll be able to do an AI search. But again, within limits, that will be great, but you might have to look through a lot of chaff, and you might not even capture the deed that you want. Always do the traditional method before you give up. This is the kind of thing you will get from one of those leases in the Registry of Deeds. former owners, names and the ages of children for lease for lives, witnesses and addresses, all sorts of useful stuff. Again, I'm moving quite fast here because we've got past 5 o'clock. Uh, William's book, the Researching Ulster Ancestors or Scots Irish Ancestors, lists for most of these estates what papers are available and where they are lodged. For example, the Adair estate in Ballymena, there's a lot of estate papers in Suffolk Record Office because the Adairs also had land there. And you can then look at the landed estate papers in Prony. These are all sorts of wonderful things that you'll find. It's not just lists of names, although even that can be very useful. This is one I found in the Templeton estate, where I'm actually sitting at this moment. And you see there, among their estate papers is a absolute full census of their tenants, including cottiers, and whenever it seems to have been prepared around 1848, but it's difficult to just work out exactly. It's undated and it has been amended as time has gone on. You can see as people have moved out, a new family has been added, or if children have been born to the family since the first list was made, they are noted as well. So a really brilliant resource. And again, from knowing what estate you're on and following that. So my mantra to you is follow the townland. Use the book to read all you can about the townland that you're interested in. Identify it from others with same or similar names, and you'll see that from the index, how many there are. And understand where it will appear in record sets. Will it be listed by barony? Will it be listed by county? Will it be listed by diocese, etc.? And understand why these records were actually formed. Why were they kept? They weren't, believe it or not, actually formed for the benefit of genealogists. And I include church records in that. Really, you're working with records where you can think, right, okay, these should be complete. I can't find my family. That may mean your family were there and are not recorded. Just think about what the person who was making the record wanted to do. Again, don't rely on the internet searches or indexes entirely. Brilliant starting point. But if you know a townland and have definitely fixed on it, go the long yards and look at it through all the different sources to make sure that there's nothing missing. And again, do a manual search before discarding that source. Also, I particularly want to draw attention to the sheer volume of 17th century materials in terms of the Irish Commission, 1622, the books of survey and distribution, the men in arms, the muster rolls, and the hearth tax rolls. Prony all these are available in Prony, but Prony have also published a book on County Antrim, hearth tax returns with names by townland and everything. There's a lot of information down to a townland level with names, and you can find your family in those. Picking up the wrong remote. So I am going to stop sharing now so that I can see what has come into the chat and deal with any questions. So thank you for your attention. I know that was a lot to take in, so I hope you're all going to look at the recording and fill in any blanks.
Andrew, thanks very much. That was fabulous. Really excellent. We do have a couple in the questions already in the chat, which we're going to deal with now. And Gillian, do you want to pick up and if you give the question to Andrew and then Andrew can frame the response to that? Okay.
Yes, I'm just trying to find it. Bear with me, everyone. I'm just rolling through the chat here.
And then we'll go to the floor if we have time. But go ahead.
Okay, bear with me. Okay. So the first question is from Maria, and She is saying, what is the best way to ascertain if a place name that you've come across in a record is a parish or a townland or a quarter?
Right. The best way is it depends on what the source is, and to read the source to see if any of those terms are mentioned. Uh, so yeah, really that's my take on it. What I would do is, if it's leases or things like that, it will usually give you a reasonable description, and it will say a quarter or whatever, or townland or whatever. But if it's just, excuse me, a list of if it's a list of rentals, or where it's basically just a list of names by townland, look down the names of the townlands in the list to see if the one you're looking for is missing. Because if it is, it's included as a quarter with one of the other names. And then look at the map to see which one it might be. That's from that point of view. From church records, again, look at the records around them. Very often, particularly Church of Ireland registers, I found that the early ones before 1840s, they don't record the townland name, particularly for marriages. They record the parish name. And if you look at the abstract of that, or the digitized copy, you'll not get that information. Whereas if you actually look at the certificate, you will be able to see that it says of the parish of Kilkeel rather than the town of Kilkeel or whatever. So you can determine it in that way again. But really, know your source and see if you can look at an original copy to see what terms are used on it.
And that's why the atlas is so great, because if you come across a
Yeah,
place name, you can see, is it in the alphabetical index of townlands? If
yeah,
not, is it in the alphabetical index of parishes? And if it doesn't appear in any of Andrew's indexes in his book, then you're looking at more uncommon areas like quarters, maybe older areas, like maybe a sub denominational name, which is a very local place name within a townland. But at least
yeah.
if you don't find it in Andrew's lists, then you know that it's going to take a little bit more research for you. Okay, and the next question, thanks Andrew, is from Elizabeth, and she has asked, what is the best way to trace the correct spelling of a townland? She has a couple of records where the townland is spelt various different ways. She's found it in the atlas another way, which is obviously the official spelling.
Yeah.
But she's assuming the one, but she was wondering, is there a way just to be sure of that, to not make an assumption on that?
Yeah, well, the answer is no. The answer is actually to use the atlas as she's done. That's really I use the Ordnance Survey spelling throughout. I really one of my heroes. Well, several heroes from the research that I did for the book. One is Sir William Petty and his surveying from the mid 1600s, which is absolutely mind blowing given the conditions he was working under. But next is Dr. John O'Donovan, who settled this Ordnance Survey spelling of townland names. Now, he was the foremost Gaelic scholar in Dublin of his day, of the 1830s, and he was employed by the Ordnance Survey to deal with this specific matter. It said that he visited every parish in Ireland in pursuit of this, and his instructions to the surveyors, the Royal Engineers out on the ground, was that they had to get every written instance of how the townland name was spelt that they could find, plus 3 spoken versions, if there were 3 spoken versions, but sort of to aim for 3 spoken versions. And he then reviewed them all individually, compared it to the history of the place and the topography. So if it was, for example, I always use this one, the townland that I grew up in, the townland next door to us was called Carnroe, Carnroe, and every business in the area uses that. Road signs use it. Everybody calls it that. But that is not its official spelling. It's Carnroe. as Dr. John O'Donovan points out, there is not a cairn in that townland. So why do you think it's Cairn Row? There is, of course, a weir, because it's on the banks of the River Bann where there's a weir, and the Irish word for weir is cairn. So it's Cairn Row. So he
Um,
fixed these, but obviously people's local pronunciation is another townland from Achadui parish that I know well. Local people call it Knockdhu, but it's actually written Knockduff. And there is a parish just across the Bann, or a townland just across the Bann in Ballymoney parish, called by the people Culduff and written Culdu. So you take your choice. And I'm a great believer in that there is no such thing as a correct spelling, but there is an official spelling of all these townlands. And our boy John O'Donovan has settled it for us, and I follow him all the way.
Great, thank you, Andrew. The other thing I would just bring your attention to in terms of that, let me see if I'm able to share. If I don't know, can you see that screen?
Yep.
Folks, that's placenamesni.org. Now, this one covers the 6 counties of Northern Ireland, and then there is also Leganium, which covers the whole island of Ireland. But with Place Names NI, what they have done with the different spellings is they have actually listed some of the older spellings on that page. So that's certainly a website that I would check just to see. And often, just think phonetically, how could someone have written this down if they have never seen it before and they're just writing it as they're hearing it? But the Place Names NI website is a really great resource for that.
Gillian,
Yep.
could I add to that the point that in connection with the other question that in place names NI and Leganium, they will indicate if a place is a minor place name or a townland name. So that's one other way to try and solve your problem. Gillian, there's another question in there from Jeanette.
Yes.
A specific one.
Lynn and Maureen Finton's answered your questions in the chat. Let's see, who was asking the other question? Sorry.
Jeanette Lindsay.
Yes. So Jeanette has asked Andrew. She has a question about map 36, the barony of Ivy Lower, which seems to have a slightly different presentation. Could you explain the significance of the presence of the coloured circles in some of the townlands and the significance of the no coloured circles in some of them?
I could very easily. That was Ivy barony was a huge barony. We talked about how it was split up into so many different subsections, and it originally belonged to the Guinness family. Lord Ivy was a McGuinness. Whenever I have then tried to, because I have been dealing with how the land was owned at the beginning of the 1600s, I wanted to reflect his personal domain estate individually. So I have done that by way of the circles. The circle, I'll just actually look up and give you an example. The map is also split weirdly because of the fact that that it's too big just to fit on 2 pages. It needs to be split across 4. But yeah, so you can see the orange circles that I can see on that. Those are indicating ones that the Hill family, the Marquesses of Downshire, have subsequently acquired. But just I wanted to maintain the initial the estates as they were at the time of the early 1600s, but yet give you an indication of what estate papers to look at. So if I'm looking at page 30, number 36 on page 94 and 95, and again, it says at the bottom of page 95, the circles indicate the post-restoration landlord of the former estates of Lord Ivy. So it just goes to show the green that takes up most of the page 94, the pale aquamarine sort of green colour, those were his estates, but he forfeited them for his part in the civil wars, and that's who then, which of the landlords they were shared out among after that date.
I think I've got the right map, Andrew. Apologies if I haven't. Does that look right?
That looks right.
Okay, just for those of you who haven't seen map 36, just to give you an idea, Andrew's giving you twice as much information by putting these dots on to
Yeah.
show.
I could have done that for a lot more, but that was one that was just a particularly large estate that had been forfeited and had been split up among people who had surrounding estates. So it was just useful to do that. Normally, I would have a red circle to show glebe land within the church's estate. That's the only other reason there would be a dot. But if you look at the bottom of the page, there's usually a wee note telling you.
Okay, super. Thank
Okay.
you.
There's another question, Gillian, from Callum.
Okay.
Scroll down.
Oh yeah, this is an interesting question. Callum's asked, what was the determining factor for the Bally to be dropped from the place name, whereas many other townlands kept the Bally when it was being referred to?
Local usage is really the determining factor. So yeah, you do see a lot of those, particularly in County Down. There's a lot of valleys in the list of, say, for example, the grant to Sir James Hamilton. It's full of valleys of townlands that have dropped the valley, but no, there's no specific rhyme or reason to it that I know of.
There's
Uh,
a good example of that, Andrew, in the I think it's the Faints, Tudor sovereigns. I think it's Elizabeth in around say that no, it's either that or sorry, forgive me, the James the First patent rolls. And
yes,
the town, and yeah, it's the James the First patent rolls, and in and around the village of Portaferry, where I actually live, many of the townlands were prefixed with Bally, which simply aren't today. So those would
yeah.
be two good. So the Feints, which are 16th into the early 17th century, and the patent rolls of James the First, which is the early first, almost first quarter of the 17th century, would be a good place to look for the locality you're interested in and see how the townland names are represented there. And any other documents or maps from that period may help. And you will find someone once told me that you'll see obviously the shortened version of Bally in the ferns of Balrath, Baldoyle, a lot very common around Dublin, for example. And a lot of those and a lot of places with Bally tend to indicate Norman settlement uh, in terms of and the place names NI uh, researchers demonstrate that in some of their volumes of how places have changed from an early form of what we call English now into Irish and back into English. So it sort of flip-flopping over the centuries in terms of how the name is presented in which language and also how it is spelled.
There's a lot of that around Temple Patrick here as well, because there's a lot of the townland names are Norman in origin, and they would have been such and such a town, and then they became Bally that instead, and then some of them have dropped the Bally completely.
Okay.
And
And then
Callum's
there's
saying, yes, he comes from the town of Crossgar in County Down, and he's seen in some of the records Ballyna Crossgar, which,
Yeah.
as you say, it's the sort of Hamilton's area. Um, we've got a couple more just to finish off, if that's okay. Joanne's asking how just to find that family search registry of deeds that you'd mentioned,
Yeah, it's
Andrew.
if you Google familysearch.org and the number 185730, it will give you what that will be your top option, will be that page that I showed you on the screen.
Okay, if you have
I'll
any more problems, Joanne, just let
Yeah.
us know and we'll see if we can send you a link or something to it.
Yeah.
Let me just see.
If you watch back the video, you'll be able to just freeze the screen and see it there. If you do miss it out.
That's a good point. And we've had a question of someone who is just beginning their Irish genealogy, and they're asking how best to find an ancestor who's supposed to have come from County Tyrone, who came over, emigrated quite early in the 1800s. Might be best just to drop us an email about that. But one of the ways that I do it, the surname's Sinclair. One of the ways I would start looking for ancestors if you're not sure exactly where they come from and they've left in, say, late 1700s or into the 1800s, is to use some of these resources that Andrew was talking about, particularly the Tithe books from the 1820s, 30s, and Griffiths from the 1850s, 60s. Now, you might say, well, my ancestors had already left, but usually someone in the family has remained behind, siblings or cousins or parents. And so you're just trying to identify parishes, in this case, parishes in County Tyrone, where that surname is found. Now, obviously, you can't do that with every surname. If you're researching the surname Murphy, for example, and you try to put it in the Tithe of Griffiths, you'd be there all day because it would be everywhere. But Sinclair is a more unusual surname, so you would put that into the Tithe valuation, Griffiths valuation, which are both available on the Roots Ireland website, and just begin to identify parishes and then see what records exist for those parishes back to the early 1800s, church records, estate papers, things like that. But like I say, drop us an email, and we can put that in an email for you. Okay, have we any more? Or I think everyone's just saying, Andrew, that it's been really helpful presentation. Let me see. Terry is asking, is it available in bookshops? Conleth, you might be better placed to answer that. I know that the Atlas is in Waterstones. I'm not sure of their stock at the minute. I was in Waterstones Belfast last week, and they definitely had some Townland Atlases. I think that's on main kind of bookshop location. Conleth, if you have...
Yeah, the hardcover version is out of print, so any stock that is available, it depends on a store-to-store basis. Waterstones do have a reasonable number of an early paperback we produced, but that will also depend on store to store. It is listed on Amazon, I believe, and it'll be listed on waterstones.co.uk. And also just because the first printing sold out in a month and a half, and the second printing sold out in about 6-7 months. We are going to be bringing it back again. This time as a permanent paperback that, all being well, will be available by the end of March 2026. So the final retail price will be $54.99. The hardback price was $69.99. And for any pre-orders, it can actually be available for $49.99, and members get additional discount off the top of that as well.
So if you want a paperback copy, you will be able to pre-order the paperback coming out early in the new year now. So there'll be a link either provided at the end, or you can just even throw it in the chat, and it will be added to the edited version of the recording.
Super. Thanks, Conleth. So I think that's all the questions for now. The link to the paperback is in the chat a couple of times, so hopefully you'll be able to find it. And we'll be sending you the link to the recording sometime next week. For those of you who had to leave early, or were not able to attend this live event. Andrew Fenton, is there anything else you want to say?
Just draw it. I'd said 185730. It's 720, as several people have mentioned in the chat. So thanks for that.
If we've nothing else from anybody, and it is coming up on 5:30 our time, so we better wind this show up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon, for staying to this. Apologies again for the delay, but it was technical driven, and we had to try and make sure we got things right before we went live. But we're grateful so many people, so many of you turned up for the live version, and we will then share the recorded version with everyone, hopefully early next week or sometime next week. Okay, bye everyone.
Bye, everyone, and happy Christmas.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.